Today, the presentation that I want to give is organized around 4 different parts or blocks, as you can see in the agenda that has been distributed. And I will give an initial presentation, and then we will open for a discussion after each of the 4 blocks. But if there is any question or anything that is not clear, feel free to raise your hand and ask clarification question also during the presentation. A few words just to introduce myself. I am a farmer for origin. I was born in a farming community in southern Italy. Then I studied, become an agricultural scientist, specializing in cut flower production. And then at the college, I decided to engage in economics, because it was the only thing I really didn't understand, so I wanted to know what's about economics. And then I specialized further in quantitative analysis, in statistical analysis. Before joining the FAO, I was a professor of statistics at the Graduate School of Agriculture at the University of Naples. And so I hold 2 doctoral degrees, one in agricultural policy and one in natural resource economics. So I would have been imagining the first time I would come to Indonesia might have been to discuss the very interesting problems of natural resource management and forestry management and the economics of using natural resources. But then, instead, it has been statistics that brought me here. But I'm very happy because I think that opportunities like this one are the real chances that what we have been studying over the years, reading on book, can be applied in a way that really has the opportunity to make a difference in people's life. So this is the reason why we are here, because we are all trying to make a difference and improve people's life. And statistics, it's a difficult area. It's a relatively new science. People don't realize that formally as a science, statistics only exist since the beginning of the 20th century, even though probability calculus, the probability theory has been there for a while, but statistical inference, which is the ability to derive proper conclusions from partial information, it's a science that is still being developed. So it's clear that there is still a lot to learn. And I hope that we will have an opportunity together to do exactly what our representative from BPS said in the opening speech. How to give meaning to the data that is collected, how to correctly interpret this data. So, the agenda for today, as I say, in my presentation, I want to cover 4 aspects. The first one is presenting what has been this deliberation of the interagency and expert group on sustainable development goal indicators. And this will take the first part of my presentation. The second part, and while the SDG agenda is very broad, it covers 17 goals, very complex. In this workshop and seminar, we focus only on goal number 2, and in particular on target 2.1 and partly 2.2, which have to do with food security and nutrition. So we will not discuss issues of sustainable agricultural production, genetic diversity, or the functioning of agricultural market, etc., which are all things also included in SDG 2. For this reason, the second part of my presentation will be focusing on food security. What is food security and how do we measure it? And this will introduce to the final part of the presentation, which will be covering the two indicators that the interagency and expert group on SDG indicator have endorsed to monitor target 2.1. The first one will be the prevalence of undernourishment, which is the traditional indicator that FAO, as Mark Smulders said earlier, have been producing since 1974 and publishing every year with the State of Food Insecurity in the World, the SOFI publication. And the second part will be on the new indicator, the prevalence of people experiencing food insecurity at different levels of severity using the food insecurity experience scale, which is an innovative method that has been developed by our team in FAO over the last 3 to 4 years. So each of these will be one of my short presentation, and then each presentation will be followed by a discussion section. Why FAO is involved in this? It may seem obvious, but I would suspect that not everybody knows that the very reason why FAO was created was related to information. This is Article 1, the first comma of the FAO Constitution, written in 1945. So, at the very beginning of the FAO Constitution, it's clearly stated that the role of the organization is to collect, analyze, interpret, and disseminate information on nutrition, food, and agriculture. So, it's not by chance that we are here. We are into a tradition that started in 1945. I don't pretend that you read all this, but these are the principles that inspires the work of the statistics division in FAO. Statistics has always had a very strong role in the organization, and the main objective is to be a reference, a global reference for methods, standards, and tools, so that when we say that things are measured according to international standards, FAO is the organization that is responsible for defining these standards, maintaining them, updating when it's needed, and providing the technical assistance to all others that have an interest in monitoring agriculture, food, and nutrition. So, as we have heard, the innovative Sustainable Development Agenda, which is the short name for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, was adopted, and in adopting the agenda, the General Assembly gave the Statistical Commission, which is a body within the UN, made of the chief statisticians of all member countries, the mandate to develop a global framework for monitoring. And to this extent, the Statistical Commission created an interagency and expert group on SDG indicator, IAAG, and the members of this group are 28 representatives of countries. The chief statistician or a delegate, a representative of the chief statistician of 28 countries have been elected to be part of this group, and each elected country is also representing other countries in the same region. Southeast and Southeast Asia, in this moment, in this round of the interagency, are represented by the chief statistician of India, China, and the Philippines. And India, China, and the Philippines are taking the deliberations, the decision, also on behalf of other countries in their respective region. I'm saying this because it's important to be aware that to be represented into this forum at the UN Statistical Commission, Indonesia should make sure to be in touch with the member countries that at the moment are members of the group. Other countries, including also the international agency like FAO, have a role of observers. Observer means that you can participate to the meeting, listen to what is being discussed, provide advice and respond to questions if the IAG members ask, but we cannot take part to the deliberations. We don't vote, we don't make decisions. So the decisions are made by the chief statisticians of these 28 countries. The group has been working continuously since it was created in order to make a proposal for the global monitoring framework that was discussed during the 47th session of the UN Statistical Commission in March 2016. The work of the interagency has been through physical meetings. We met in New York City the first time, in around February 2015, in Bangkok around October 2015, and the last time in Mexico City just before the Statistical Commission in February 2016. The next meeting will be in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, this coming October. In addition to the in-person meeting, there has been web-based consultations. There is an active website. If you Google IAEG-SDG, you will be pointed to a website that is maintained by the Statistical Division of the UN, in which all the documents, all the deliberation, all the material that the interagency group has produced is freely available. Through this web portal, also the consultations have been held, in which, for example, the proposals of the various indicators have been distributed, soliciting comments from everyone, including academicians, representative of the civil society, and so that the interagency group could take into account all observations of these indicators. At the end, a list of 229 that soon become 230, because one indicator was added, have been compiled and proposed to the UN Statistical Commission for endorsement. The UN Statistical Commission accepted this list with very encouraging words, saying that this is a very important and suitable starting point for the global monitoring framework of the SDG agenda. This means that the work is not completed. This is just the starting point, and we need to continue working to make sure that a comprehensive monitoring framework exists in order to monitor progress towards 2030. When selecting the indicators to be included in the list, the interagency group followed a series of guiding principles. Indicators should have been directly relevant to the target. The targets are multidimensional, very complex. There are 169 different targets, and each target may contain different elements. So already since the beginning it was clear that we needed a very large number of indicators. But one of the principles that the interagency followed was to try and limit as much as possible, so no more than 2 indicators per target. Indicators should be methodologically sound, which means that there should be an agreement and an accepted methodology, should allow for disaggregation by geographic, socio-demographic, or economic groupings whenever it's relevant, and should not impose an excessive additional burden on national statistical system, because the guiding principle of the SDG monitoring framework is that all data and information should be produced by countries, owned by countries, and so the countries themselves should be in the driving seat to monitor the agenda. And this is a slight change of perspective compared to the MDG process, which was felt more like a UN system-centered process in which countries were imposed an agenda that was decided within the UN system, and now the situation politically is completely different. The Sustainable Development Goal agenda is created, driven, and managed by the member countries themselves. Of course, while we started engaging in the work, we realized that despite the fact that the interagency has been able to create a list of 230 indicators, not all indicators are ready to be applied at the global level for several reasons. And so there has also been a classification of these indicators in 3 different tiers or levels. Tier 1 indicators are those for which there exists a consolidated and agreed upon set of methods. For example, the existing MDG indicators that had been used already for 15 years are ready to continue. And there are a few others, more indicators that can be immediately used. The tier 2 indicators are indicators for which there is an agreement on the methods and the data needs, but for most countries the data is not available yet, or at least is not available in the form that is needed to compile the indicators. And so there is some work to be done in terms of data collection, but it's possible that in few years, 1 or 2 years, these tier 2 indicators will start to be reported. And then there is another group of indicators, the tier 3 indicators, for which the work is still quite heavy because no agreement exists on the overarching methods, definitions, and principles. Even though there is an agreement on the concept that you need an indicator to monitor that particular aspect of development, but there is no shared agreement on what is the best way to do it. So for these tier 3 indicators, the interagency and expert group will continue work on thematic areas, with the support from technical specialized agencies. And it's expected that in a couple of years there will be found an agreement on all these indicators. Finally, for each indicator in the list, the UN Statistical Division, which holds the secretariat of the interagency, requested that one agency would be acting as the custodian of the indicators. It is very important because otherwise the process of collecting the information, validating the information, reporting in a consistent way for 192 different countries every year in order to inform the Sustainable Development Goal report would be very difficult. So each indicator has found a home with one of the international agencies. And as Dr. Smolder said before, FAO has been identified as the custodian of 20 indicators and is also part of the group of agencies that contributes to additional 5 indicators. What are the responsibility of the custodian agency? The first one is to maintain the methodology, especially in order to ensure that the indicator that is compiled in different countries are truly comparable, so that there is the same methodological basis no matter which country is reporting. The second task is to provide the technical support to make sure that each and every country is able to compile and report it. And this event is part of the commitment that FAO has made in this sense. Then our role will also be to receive the data and the indicator from country in order to report to the UN Secretary General and the preparation of the annual SDG report. And in compiling the SDG report, we will also need to compile regional and global aggregates. So to make sure that, for example, we can aggregate the information that comes from all countries in the Southeastern Asia, create aggregate an indicator at the level of the region, and then aggregating the region at the level of a global indicator. So you recognize how important it is that the methodology is consistent, because otherwise aggregation will be impossible. Within FAO, we organized ourselves by identifying a technical unit, a team or a division that is responsible for the indicators. I have the honor and the pleasure to lead the team that works on food security and nutrition statistics within the statistics division. Filippo is a colleague that works in the team. We are a team of about 15 people working on various aspects related to food security and nutrition statistics. And we are the reference for 2 of the 230 indicators in the list. These are labeled, numbered according to the goal and target. So we have 2 indicators under goal 2, target 2.1. The first indicator, therefore, has numbers 2.1.1 and is the prevalence of undernourishment. And the other one is 2.1.2 and can be described as the prevalence of food insecurity at moderate and severe level, measured using the food insecurity experience scale. So I will stop here now. This is my first of 4 presentations today, and I would like to open the floor for questions, clarifications, and general discussion on this first element. So how the international community has organized itself to reach a monitoring framework for the SDG agenda. Thank you. You can ask the question in the microphone, in Bahasa, or in English as you prefer. If it's in Bahasa, my dear colleague will help translating, and I apologize, but I don't speak Bahasa.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Carlo. My name is Gancang Amanullah, Director of Social Welfare, People Welfare Statistic from BPS. I've been discussed with you with teleconference. In my mind, I just actually I would like to know, because one important issue in SDGs is no one left behind. So related to the indicator, you said 2.1 and 1 and 2.1 and 2. And the availability of data in BPS might be for Indonesia good if we can produce for national and provincial level. Maybe yes, we can, but for the district or municipality, this is quite a big problem for us. Currently for Susenas is we have total sample is 300,000. Yeah, but when we estimate the data in level of district, this is the figure is not good enough to present this indicator. So use it in 2.1 and 0.2 in several level, in different level. What kind of different level is it? If by district, I said already it is problem. I think this is I would like to know your answer about my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Carlo. So I'm Arum from SDG Secretariat. I think we have already have the teleconference discuss about these two indicators. I would like to have your explanation related about time frame for the generate the SDGs indicator. In your explanation, that for the tier 1s we have no problem, and then for tier 2 there will be about 2 years we will ready, and then tier 3 is the problem. Now the Indonesian try to have the intensive discussion for metadata for the all indicator, and then this is the basis for the development of action plan in national as well as in the subnational. For the SDGs goals too, we have a lot of the problem with the indicator, and then we try to use the national definition. You see, for example, we discussed with FAO representative in Indonesia, and also with our colleagues from the several stakeholders. You see, because we in our 5 years development plan, this indicator is already put, and that's the development agenda. You see, we have to make sure that we achieve the indicator during in the 5 years development plan. What is your suggestion or maybe your opinion about this? Because we have to also relate to our 5-year development plan, and also we have to compatible with the global standard for that. Thank you very much.
Let me start with the first one, which relates to the possibility of disaggregation. And as I mentioned, that was one of the criteria that the group of the member countries that first developed the Sustainable Development Agenda and then participated into the monitoring, the creation of the design of the monitoring framework, had very clear in mind. The new SDG agenda is a universal agenda. No one left behind. Another interesting and nice quote that was made by the Mr. David Nabarro, who's the special advisor to Secretary Ban Ki-moon on the SDG agenda, says, nowadays, every country in the world is a developing country. There is no more any difference between developed and developing countries, because even in very high income countries, there is part of the population that face development problems. So the agenda needs to be universal. Indicators, the theme, the targets, the content should be relevant for all countries, and the monitoring should be such that if there are problems within a country, this can be identified. So disaggregation of the information is a key requirement in order to be able to understand the differences within the country, rather than just difference between countries. But this is where the role of the statistical system is crucial. And you pointed out to the fact that even the SUSENAS, which is by and large one of the best examples of household surveys in the world, has very large coverage, it's conducted twice a year, a relatively large sample size, might still be not sufficient to provide the acceptable level of representativeness to be able to compile indicators at district level, below the provincial level. And this is a difficulty that all countries in the world have. But my opinion is that it's not a reason to give up to the idea of monitoring at subnational level, but also it shouldn't be a reason for neglecting proper indicators and proper statistical methods and settle for methods that apparently can be used in a quick and dirty way, so that would be possible, for example, in principle, to collect the data on each and every household, or to run a population census every year, but that would be extremely costly. So we have to cut the balance. We have to find the right compromise between statistical propriety, statistical soundness of the method, and cost effectiveness of data collection. My personal advice is to conduct a critical review of the various pieces of information that are collected with survey, and disregard the pieces of information that are either less relevant or that are not being used effectively, because I think that I find that very often the amount of data that is collected with household survey do not get really analyzed and utilized for many reasons, because there has been a proliferation of modules, etc. So it's your job as the responsible for the surveys into the statistical unit to be very, very aware of the cost and benefit of having additional modules in a survey. Colleagues in other countries, like in Brazil, for example, are moving more and more towards an integrated system of surveys. So a continuing survey in which not every year you ask every module. So there is a rotating system of modules so that in a period of, let's say, 5 years, you have collected different modules from economic, health, education, food security, etc., but not all module each and every year. So this is one way of gaining some efficiency. But my main message is that we should be very wise in choosing indicators that have a good content of information and that can be collected at a limited cost. Now, specifically for the food security indicator, I want to make sure that we, at the end of the workshop, understand that all the information that is needed to compile the prevalence of undernourishment is already available in Indonesia. And it's available with the existing system of surveys. So there is no need to add anything. And this can be compiled, I agree, only at the provincial level. To go at the district level, we probably don't have the proper representativeness to make sure that if we detect a difference between two districts, this difference is a real difference and is not only due to sampling error. So I don't have an answer to that. The only thing I can say is that as FAO will be very happy if every country would report at the provincial level. It will already be a big improvement compared to the past when we only reported at the national level. The second indicator, it's admittedly a new indicator, so it may require some addition. But as we will see later, it's a very, very cost-effective indicator. And so I hope that you will consider that the additional burden required to collect the data on the food insecurity experience scale is a worthy investment, especially if it can be used to substitute on other information that is currently collected, which may become less relevant. So I hope I was able to respond to the disaggregation question. Let's move to the timing. And first of all, the first UN Secretary General report on Sustainable Development Goal has already been published. In the end of June, beginning of July 2016, there is already the first issue of the UN Sustainable Development Goal report. If you look at the Interagency Expert Group page, or you just Google SDG report, you will find that we have already provided information on a number of indicators that have been assembled and in compiling the first report. Of course, most of the indicators that have been reported are only the tier 1 indicators for which the evidence was already there. So this first issue is limited, doesn't cover every indicator, but the idea is that the report will be published every year around end of June, which means that as the custodian agency, we will be trying to compile all the data from the entire world by end of March, which means that we should receive the microdata and all the other information by countries by December. So this is hopefully our timeline, that by December we have all the information to start compiling, assembling, creating the regional aggregate, report in March, and so in June the indicators will be reported with the statistical report of the UN. There is also a global database with all the information that we have reported. It's freely accessible, and there is a metadata repository. So also the question regarding your work now in trying to define the national monitoring for monitoring the national plan. If you need to make a reference to metadata of global indicators, these are already published and freely available on the internet. My advice is that you reach out to the focal point for each indicator. So for example, any question related to this indicator, you send me an email, ask Lina to call me, we have a conversation, but do the same with all focal points for the other indicators. And it's very important, I think, that the alignment of existing indicators with the global indicator is as complete as possible. Now, I want to touch on a point that we will touch upon also in the second presentation, that sometimes we may discover that some of the indicators that have been used for some time with the intention to detect progress actually do not work. And so this is an opportunity now also to critically review the reasons why some indicator may have not been successful in revealing the progress that has been made. And we will discuss this particular point with reference to the caloric inadequacy indicator. So I think while I recognize the need to ensure continuity, to make sure that targets that have been set in the past can be monitored, it's also important to recognize whether there are problems with the past indicator and whether there is a need to adjust. And maybe retrospectively, because one good thing about the data is that you don't lose them, they are still there. So retrospectively, you can also compile indicators for the past in order to see what kind of progress has been there. And we are ready to provide assistance also for this. So for example, if by the end of the workshop we recognize that the prevalence of undernourishment has a distinct advantage compared to reporting the percentage of households consuming less than 1,400 calories, we might also do it retrospectively and see what has been the progress in reducing the caloric inadequacy over the past 20 years. Okay, so we don't have questions. I would move to the next presentation.